All right. So, what if the real secret to more referrals, more clients, and more growth wasn't marketing harder, but becoming impossible to ignore for the people you serve? So, let's see what that looks like. So, welcome back to Voices of Impact, where we explore the ideas, leadership philosophies, and transformative stories shaping the future of business, influence, and meaningful impact. Today's guest has spent decades helping professionals answer one of the most important questions in business. How do you become the obvious choice in a crowded marketplace? So, not through gimmicks, not through endless self promotion, and not through chasing every new marketing trend, right? We're going against the hustle and grind. This is a different conversation, but through trust, relevance, relationships, and reputation. I'm honored to welcome Bill Cates to the show. So, we're going to be talking about how authentic positioning creates magnetism, referrals, and predictable cash flow without the hustle and grind, right? So, known by many as the OG of referrals, Bill is one of the world's leading experts on referral based business growth, client acquisition, and relationship driven success. As a Hall of Fame speaker, author, consultant, and founder of Referral Coach International, Bill has helped thousands of professionals generate more business through trust, credibility, and meaningful client experiences, which is amazing. He's author of multiple best-selling books, including Get More Referrals Now, Beyond Referrals, Radical Relevance, and The Hidden Heist, which is also amazing. So congrats on that. And
Thank
what I
you.
appreciate most about his work is that he challenges the common assumption that growth comes from being louder and by really hustling and putting yourself out there in a more grind way, right? We're going against that. Instead, he teaches that growth comes from being more relevant, being more you, being more authentic. So, more valuable, more memorable, and more referable. Because when people clearly understand the value you create and trust the experience you deliver, referrals stop feeling random and forced and it starts becoming predictable and natural, right? And what makes this conversation especially aligned is what both believe in, that trust is really the foundation of sustainable growth, which a lot of people like underestimate or forget. So we want to really talk about that. Visibility without relevance creates noise, and authentic positioning creates natural magnetism. And I can kind of speak to that as I'm currently going through that, and it has gotten given me really good results already. So, and now that we live in a very tech AI driven world, human connection becomes even more valuable. So, we'll get into that. So, today we'll explore what it really means to become radically relevant and why the businesses that win long term are the ones people can't stop talking about and keep, referring, right? So, Bill, honored to have you here. Welcome to Voices of Impact.
It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to a conversation I hope everybody finds helpful.
Amazing. Love that. And of course, I think it's very timely of where leadership is going now with authenticity. So many people know you today as the OG of referrals, but how did you originally find your way into this
Well, how far back do you want to go? I used to be a drummer in a rock and roll band, toured the country, but that's a past life.
world?
So let's go to when I had a couple of book publishing companies, and I sold both of the companies. So when someone says they sold a business, did they make a lot of money? Did they get out of a bad business? Right? Well,
Mhm.
I kind of experienced both. I sold one for a pretty penny, and the other one just to get out from under the debt and a bad partnership. And then I turned my attention to speaking and writing and consulting. And within a few years, I always loved the prospecting. I always loved kind of the thrill of the hunt, if you will, and trying to identify someone who would be a good prospect for the business and how to reach out to them and find some creative ways perhaps to reach out. And along the way, I just realized how important the referral process was. Very few people talked about it. Most people kind of saw referrals as the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
It's, we do a good job. Yeah, we get some referrals, but we got all this other marketing and all this other prospecting and cold calling and this and this and this. And I go, well, how do people really want to meet you? And how do your best clients seem to meet you? And for most businesses, not all, but for most, it was primarily referrals, introductions. And I said, well, that's the cake then. Let's build a business based on how people want to meet us to that borrowed trust. And I know we'll get into all of that, but that's kind of the evolution of this. And I've written 8 books. I've started my 9th a couple weeks ago. And I love the topic of building great relationships and then quote unquote leveraging those relationships in the spirit of service to everybody. And it usually makes everything a little bit easier when you work through the relationships.
Yeah, amazing. I love this. I love your philosophy because you know how it is. And when I started entrepreneurship, it was all this bro marketing of chasing and lead generation and automation. And I've been there and I'm just like, this doesn't work. And
Mm,
I love how you said everyone thought it was the icing and it's actually the cake. And it's very true. And I just shifted my business model recently
mm.
into having understanding that trust referrals is the foundation because I learned it the other way. You know how it is in this coaching and consulting industry. It's all about, the focus is on profit rather than relationships. And here we are having this conversation where we believe differently, right?
Well, and I don't get me wrong. I don't believe I believe in profit.
Of course, both. Yeah,
But I believe in efficiency. And the interesting thing is that the referral process is probably the only marketing avenue that will actually increase revenue and decrease expenses at the same time. So now we're talking profit,
yeah,
right? Increase revenue, decrease expenses. So, and it's done through better relationships. And I don't want to discount some of the other things that people are doing. I'm not saying we don't
yeah,
do other things, especially if you're newer in the business. Sometimes a new business has to look at other things to do, and we can talk about that. But if the relationship is at the center and the heart, and that
exactly.
the path of least resistance is meeting someone else through a recommendation from someone else, then we certainly want to emphasize that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually both. And we start out with the relationships and trust and go into the profit, right? And that's actually, I learned it the other way because that's what I thought it was. It was easier, right? It's not that we don't get the profit. It's just that it was like an uphill battle. And
Hmm.
a lot of people have been coming to me asking, like, you know what? I just feel like it used to be exciting and now it's not. I don't know what's going on. And then I know because we forget about the foundational pieces, and I wanted
Hmm.
to get into that of was there a defining moment when you realized referrals wasn't just like a sales thing, it was not just like about profit but a business philosophy, and when did that start though in your own?
Yeah, I'd say it started when I started my first book, which is long out of print, called Unlimited Referrals. And that came out in 1996. That's how long I've been at this. And as I developed the book and developed the concepts for the book, and I saw what else was out there and written, and there wasn't a lot. There was some. It was mostly around networking. That was the main thing. If you back in 95, 96, when I was writing the book, if you looked up referrals, you mostly found it under the banner of networking. And that's a piece of the puzzle. That certainly is important. But there's a lot more to it than that. You've got to become referable. You want to be appropriately proactive. Lately, we've been focusing on getting introduced, and there's all kinds of other things that come into play. So it was really in the writing of the book where I get my head around the whole concept and not just networking, not just asking, but what's the whole philosophy around this. And so what it's kind of morphed into is building a culture of
Yeah.
meeting people through other people. I like to say the way of the world is meeting people through other people, and the well-crafted introduction is the warm way we get into their lives. And if you're a solopreneur, if you're an individual, then it's a culture that you're building with your clients. If you're a leader of a large organization, when you maybe have multiple salespeople and business development people, there's two cultures. There's a culture within the bigger organization of understanding this is how we're going to meet people. This is going to be at least one of our primary ways. And then each individual salesperson, I work a lot with financial advisors, each individual advisor, they're going to build their own culture within their client base. So it's building of a culture. And when people call me to speak on the topic, I often say, do you want to expose people to the ideas, or do you want to build a culture? And they stop and they go, well, tell me more about that culture thing,
Right.
right? Because that's how it gets sustained, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So anyway, that was kind of just writing the book and just getting my head around it and seeing what other people were teaching and how it came through me and what my philosophy was. I developed the whole curriculum and principles and strategies and tactics around it.
Wow, that's amazing. And I love when you said culture because I'm also building a collective called a community. And a lot of people come to me in general and they're like, okay, so how much is this community, all this stuff? And we go straight into strategy and all of that. And the first thing I said is I want to first, it's a founding membership. It's really to build that culture. And what that meant was something that I think a lot of mission driven entrepreneurs, I call it purpose driven, we kind of lead with that, right? We lead with our mission and to really deeply serve. And that comes from within, right? We do have to do the inner work and come from the abundance mindset, of course, but it's really serving your people and making them feel seen and heard and experience that. And then when you do that and you build that culture first, the referrals are natural. And that's something I experienced within the past month that I was just serving. I was like, what do you need? Like, what's next for you? How can I support you? Right. And then it
Hmm.
just naturally was like within a month, like, I want to refer you, like in what you're doing. So culture is the first thing. And then, like to your point, that's what creates the long term sustainability. Because nowadays, especially the first 1 to 3 years, and I want to speak to that because we focus a lot on short term growth, is we need the money, we need the revenue, we need the clients, and we just go straight into that hustling. But we want to prevent that, and that gives you inconsistent revenue. But if you want consistent, long term, predictable, we need to, like you to your point, stick with creating the cake first and creating the environment and the thriving culture, right? So I love how you express that. So thank you.
Hmm.
And going into radical relevance. So, what does that actually mean when you talk
Yeah.
about radical relevance?
Yeah. So a little shameless promotion. Hold up the book. I wrote a book called Radical Relevance, and I'll tell you how it came about. First of all, and then I'll get into the meat of it. Is so forever I've been teaching folks how to get more referrals, more introductions. Lately, we've been emphasizing more the introduction side of it, the connection side, not just word of mouth, not just hey, you should talk to so and so, but really getting folks to make a good connection because it's just so hard to reach people these days.
Yeah,
But then we have to talk about our value. We have to talk about our value in a way that's relevant, meaning it'll be interesting, catch the attention of other people in this noisy world,
right.
and then compelling, moving them to take some action. And I learned that how we talk about our value not only helps us win more clients, but also teaches our clients how to talk about us as well. So it does kind of two things. And so what do I mean by radical relevance? Well, just in general, it's getting to know our who we are serving. We talk about the why. A lot of people talk about the why, and that's important. Why we believe in the value and the connection of our experience to why we're doing what we're doing, and that's all good. People want to get a sense of who we are. Most people have a pretty good sense of what they do, so the what's kind of taken care of. Even their process, the how, hopefully they have that down. But the who isn't often addressed, and I found that when you know who you're trying to reach and you narrow and get so well defined on that persona or avatar, all the other stuff really falls into place nicely. And so in the book Radical Relevance, we cover kind of two areas. One is what I call strategic relevance, where we cover the principles and the strategies. And those are things like your who, your target market, your persona, your differentiators, what makes you a little bit different in a way that really matters to people, not just window dressing difference. And then the tactical side, which is how do you express that to people? What is your value positioning statement? What is your differentiation statement? We have a few formulas we teach around that. So that's what I mean by radical relevance. And this actually the subtitle kind of says it all. It's cut sharpen your marketing message, cut through the noise, win more ideal clients. So it's about cutting through the noise. And the brain wants clarity because the brain doesn't want to work too hard. The brain's job is to conserve calories, to conserve energy. And so anything that's a little bit confusing, anything that isn't clear, the brain starts to fight that a little bit. And it doesn't mean
Yeah,
people can't if you have a cluttered message, it doesn't mean people can't get through it. Sometimes they can and they do. But man, we want to make it as easy as possible. And so, one of the principles here in radical relevance and just marketing and sales in general is the concept of empathy. And that is appreciation for understanding the other person's situation. So, we want to make sure that when we're talking about our value, that we're erring on the side of using you and your and not we and I and our, right? It's about 70% about them because they need to see themselves in how we talk about what we do. Whether
mm,
we're telling a story, whether we're using certain phrases, whether we're describing the problems or the opportunities, they need to be nodding their head, say, "Yeah, I get that. I see that. That's me." And that's relevance, and that's what draws people in, and you earn the right to their attention by being relevant. If not, you'll be ignored, and nobody wants to be ignored.
exactly, exactly. Wow, amazing stuff and points that you just said. And yeah, it's really about them. And when I first got into coaching, we get into this coaching or this business or entrepreneurship, whatever you are, and consultant or anything. And we talk about I all the time, right? And I also learned the same thing. It's not about you and your business, it's about the person. And like you said, who? I always touch on the why, but I love how you said the who, which is definitely something that my coach didn't tell me in the beginning. That I struggled and I had to really realign on my who because I was doing everything correctly, but I was like, the people that I'm talking to is just not aligning. So I had to get like super clear on that
Hmm.
first.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how you talked about relevant and showcasing your value. There's different ways. I mean, I call it the UVP or the unique selling point or the value proposition because everyone's kind of doing similar to what you're doing, but what makes you different? And that's why the referral system is very different because you're showing up as your authentic self and not like the other people, which, like you said, I'm not against it, but we want to make sure we're coming from place of that culture, forming the connection, really deeply understanding someone's pain points and their aspirations and helping them get there, right? So I love how you said it's very important to be memorable and not like, impossible to ignore. So that was my next question of why do so many talented experts, they're just so capable and amazing, but they just struggle to become memorable in the marketplace because maybe there's a fear coming in the way or
Hmm.
why does that happen? And then also the difference between relevance and visibility. So just kind of getting into that.
Yeah. So, it's hard to get into the heads of people and what stops them. But I think one of the principles behind everything I teach, and by the way, I like to teach on three levels. The principles, these are principles almost never change. Like one of the principles around referrals is borrowed trust. We leverage this principle, this dynamic of borrowed trust. Another principle is being referable. You've got to be referable. Otherwise, there's nothing worth talking about. Some people say you got to be remarkable, meaning worthy of remark.
Yeah.
So another principle that often stops people, sometimes newer in the business, although I've seen it at all levels, is believing that your value is worth sharing. Do you believe your value is worth sharing? And a lot of folks shy away from touting their own horn, or I should say, tooting their own horn, you know, bragging, all that sort of stuff. And I get that. We got to be a little careful about hyperbolic marketing language. But if you don't believe in your core that you're bringing value to other people, then you'll always struggle with sales, with marketing, with referrals, with the whole nine yards. So that's a big part of it. All right. So now how do you bolster that? How do you bolster your belief? Well, you look for evidence around you. And so everyone on this call, myself included, should be getting referrals, introductions without asking,
Yeah.
right? That's a bit of evidence that at least other people believe our value is worth sharing. And that's pretty important. We look for value recognizing statements, meaning the things that our prospects and clients and others say to us, that they thank us for explaining things. They thank us for helping them. They thank us for saving them from their own selves. All the things, all the places people thank us, that's what I call value recognizing statements. And so we got to take those in and pay attention to those, get through that imposter syndrome that a lot of people feel often early in their business. And then I teach a technique. I've been teaching this for, 30 plus years. I call it the value discussion. And it really is checking in with prospects and clients. It's mostly clients, but even with prospects, to make sure they're actually indeed seeing the value, that they're recognizing the value. We're becoming referable, and our value is becoming worth sharing when value's been delivered and value's been recognized. So, how do we know it's recognized? Well, unsolicited referrals, value recognizing statements, but then checking in with our clients. And I've done a little research into the brain research around this, and I discovered that there's a lot of neuroscience that supports what we kind of already know, and that is this. We get stuck in a situation, personal, professional, whatever. We need to talk it out with someone, right? So we grab a friend, a colleague, family member. Say, I just got to talk this out, right? Just listen to me and, see if you have any suggestions. And so we talk it out. We explain the situation. And usually by the time we're done, we've already figured out what we need to do. We've gained that clarity without our friend or colleague even having to chime in. We've kind of figured it out. And there's brain science that shows speaking orally, speaking out loud, literally out loud, any kind of situation, thinking through it, talking through it out loud will actually create clarity. And it
Yeah.
starts to rewire the neurosynapses a little bit in the brain. And so, what we want to do then is we want to check in with our clients to make sure they're seeing the value. In what ways are they seeing the value? We may think we're providing value here, but they're actually getting it over here. So, we learn a lot about how what we do rests and with other people. They're getting clear on the value, which is good for them. They have a sense of it already, but now they're speaking it out. They're getting clear. That's making us more referable. We're learning that we're more referable. So our confidence is building. And so this whole value discussion, this value check-in is just a huge piece of moving forward with the rest of the process of getting great word of mouth, of getting great referrals and introductions.
Yeah.
So I hope that answers the first part. Then you asked the second question. It was something about visibility versus relevance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I've never been asked that question before, so I'm kind of thinking through it a little bit as
Mhm.
we talk here. But I would say that you can't get visibility without relevance, or you won't get much, and it won't be lasting, and it won't be effective, right? So the relevance has to come first. And how does a LinkedIn post start to get shared? How does any video go viral? How does any of the visibility happen? Well, people find it relevant,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't pay attention to it, and it would die very quickly or produce no results. So relevance is first, and you've got to have. So here's an example: having a very clear target market, very clear on the who. And this looks different for a lot of folks, but we'll take from my world a little bit. I work with a lot of financial advisors, so for them, it could be employees in a large company, it could be business owners in a certain industry. Very clear, well-defined target market. And so what happens when you're very clear on that, all your messaging gets clear. It's more, they see themselves in the messaging. They see that you work with people like them. It's easier to create a reputation, which is part of visibility. It's easier to create a reputation in a narrowly defined target market than it is kind of a broad approach.
Hmm.
And generally speaking, as long as you hit certain criteria, the narrower the better. And what happens is a lot of folks, when they're thinking about marketing and expanding their business and talking about who they serve, they go, well, I don't want to leave these people out. And we've done some pretty good work for these folks, so I don't want to leave them out. What happens, the larger the net we try to cast, the weaker the messaging gets.
Hmm.
And so it may be a little counterintuitive, but
Yeah.
the narrower the better. And so that's how we create the reputation. That's how we create the visibility by the radical relevance. And then, of course, employing good strategies and tactics to get the word out. That's also very important, too, to make ourselves visible. We can't just, depend on the kindness of others. So that's a piece of it.
Yeah.
So it's believing our values we're sharing, being clear on who we're sharing it with, and then using the right techniques to get the visibility out there. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, absolutely. This is
Good.
amazing, and thank you so much. Like,
Yep.
it's just very in depth what you had answered, and I love that because, a lot of people just give that surface level, tactics, but I think this is very important. I love how you talk about the mindset shift. It's the
Yeah.
first thing that I tell people as well, and I share with my clients is you have to believe in yourself and your value. And my coach has said this many times because he's like, like I said, all of us as entrepreneurs, especially I want to talk about the early ones, we just go straight into the strategy, and put ourselves out there and, okay, well, I want visibility because I want clients, but we forget the foundational piece.
Right.
And the mindset shift is the key here. What is your true value and why don't you believe in it? Like, how would you believe in yourself, right? If no one else will follow you, like if you don't follow yourself, you don't believe in yourself. So you have to focus on that first. And what does that look like in value? And especially if someone is out there doing high ticket, if it's like a 2 3K package, like you need to believe that what you offer is of high value, like it's like 7 8 years of your own work, right? So making sure that you do the inner work first, and once you understand that value, it's easier to, like you said, position yourself, and the messaging just comes naturally. And that's something that I've struggled many times before, until I was like, I had to do that inner work first and build that confidence before I put it out there. So that's like the first thing.
Hmm.
And I love how you talked about the relevance comes first before visibility, right? And similar thing is making sure that we have our message right, and we focus on the sales piece and the profit. I think we had another conversation on another podcast, and he was saying the same thing: is whoever is like an author or speaker, there's a reason why we're authors and speakers, right? And there's a message behind that. So lead with that message first, and then craft it into a message, like a messaging framework or positioning, and then put that out there rather than like, this is what I do and this is about me, right? It's this is how you create the impact. And when you lead with that impact, immediately people resonate, like, they feel seen and heard, and then that referrals come in, right? So that visibility reach increases. So I love how you said all of that. And yeah, because there's people don't know the difference, right? You and I might know, but I think listeners are still like, I want to get visible. But I even say to people now, it's not just about visibility. You have to position yourself and to be seen as the expert and your message and your impact and why, and talking to the right people, right, who resonate with that language. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. And
Hmm.
going into a referral strategy, because this is something that's very new. And I feel like I just implemented this system into my own business model, which has been tremendously successful. But some people are following, I'm not against the other marketing tactics, but what can they do to implement this predictable referral strategy?
Yeah, it's really quite simple. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's certainly not rocket science to understand. And so at the core, and I have when I do my presentations in front of groups, I have a slide that kind of illustrates this. But at the core of the circle, if you will, is the mindset. We've got to have the right mindset. We've got to have a referral mindset. We have to understand that the lifetime value of a client or a customer isn't just the business we can do with them, it's also who they can introduce us to over a lifetime. So if we have that attitude, we look and see things a little bit differently. We have to believe that asking for introductions, asking for referrals is a safe thing to do. Asking for help is actually a sign of a healthy ego. And in this case, we're asking for help to help others. So having an attitude of expectation, we don't tell our clients, we expect them to introduce us, but we have an attitude of confident awareness, meaning we're confident in the value that we bring, and we become aware of other people in their life and where they move and businesses they're connected to, et cetera. And so we just see those opportunities. So that's a little bit of the mindset. It starts there, but then you got to be referable. I mentioned that earlier. And part of the referability equation I've covered in that value discussion, that's when you see you're becoming referable, and just actually having the discussion and getting your clients to speak out loud the value increases your referability. And having a great client engagement plan, making sure that you're staying in touch with clients, and you want to stay in touch with clients in two ways, two parallel paths that kind of cross over and relate to each other. And one is value. How do we keep bringing value? How do we drip value on these folks, even if there isn't any core work to be done with this person right now? How do we still add value? Could be through newsletter, could be through, videos, through lots of different ways. But if we don't keep bringing value, we're no longer necessary in their world. And then the personal side of things, the personal connection, I often call it the business friendship. We're not becoming BFFs, but there's that relationship that grows a little bit beyond the core work we do. We got to nurture that as well. That could be sending a birthday card. It could be just remembering someone's got an important sporting event or their children or whatever, and breaking bread with our clients from time to time, all the various things that will client appreciation events that will build that side. So we've got to be referable. And then once we become referable, then that word leverage comes into play. And that is being appropriately proactive. And, it's funny when I get calls from folks for coaching and consulting and speaking, they often say, "Hey, Bill, is there a way to be proactive? Is there a way to ask without looking like," and this is what I hear, the creepy referral guy, right? Nobody wants to look like the creepy referral guy. In fact, I've now named 3 referral characters. I call them the 3 Disney referral characters that no one wants to look like, and that's creepy, sleazy, and cheesy when it comes to referrals. So, and the good news is, yes, there are a lot of ways to do this. And one strategic level is promoting introductions. How do we promote? How do we just say things like, "Hey, Vina, I just want to let you know I'm never too busy to see if I can be a resource for other people you care about. It could be as simple as that. It
Yeah.
could be, don't keep me a secret. That's a phrase that I title one of my books, Don't Keep Me a Secret. Lots of different ways to promote and encourage. One of the probably the most powerful ways to encourage and to promote the possibility of introductions is to teach your would-be introducers, your prospects, your clients, your also centers of influence. Teach them what it would look like if they did introduce you. The fact that you're going to be very careful, that things are going to be confidential, that you're not going to pester people, that you're going to keep them in the loop to let them know how it's going. So just letting them know what it would look like if they did think of someone.
Yeah.
Now that's all short of asking. That's a promoting, that's encouraging. And then there's the actual ask. And I teach the methodologies around there. It starts with the value discussion. It's based on having people in front of us who understand our value,
Yeah.
and then brainstorming. We want to set up a dynamic of can we chat about this a little bit? Can we brainstorm a little? Can we put our heads together? It's not, can you think of anyone else who should know about the work I do? It's too broad. It
Yeah.
usually fizzles. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes it'll produce result, but usually it fizzles. And so we got to get narrow, and we gotta, Vina, I know that you're connected with so-and-so, or you mentioned your business partner, or you mentioned this, whatever. So we're looking for that confident awareness I mentioned earlier, that
Yeah.
awareness. Every business has trigger events that their clients, that their prospective clients are going through, whether it's in a B2B business context or a B2C. There's moments. So we can suggest some trigger events. You came to me because you were experiencing this in your business. Gosh, can we stop for a minute and think anyone else that is going through a similar challenge that you think should at least be aware of the work I do?
Mm.
Assuming we come up with a very comfortable introduction. I'm always using the word comfortable right next to the word introduction or
Mm.
within the same sentence, because we want people to understand that it's not going to be a lot of people had bad experiences around this. So,
Yeah.
and by the way, I recommend when you're talking to a prospect, a client, anyone has the ability to connect you with someone else, use the word introduction and or connection. Do not use the word referrals. People have had bad experiences
Yeah.
around that,
Yeah.
and we want a connection, we want an introduction. So we want to use the words that represent what we really want. Connection,
Exactly.
introduction. All right. So the third step is the connection. Once we've asked, we've identified one or more people that this client of ours is willing to introduce us, then we got to talk about the introduction. There was a time when people could say to us, "Hey, just call my friend, use my name. Call my colleague, use my name. Or I will tell her about you." And lo and behold, she called, right? But those days have changed. Those days are few and far between now.
Right.
The conversation is not over until we've collaborated on a bit of an introduction that's going to feel comfortable and effective. We need to be comfortable and effective. And so we work with that introducer to make sure we do that. And here's the neat thing. If we follow these three steps, client engagement, become referable, leverage, appropriately proactive, connection, getting introduced, and then we start to use the client principles of client engagement with that new prospect, then this wheel never stops spinning. And I have a PowerPoint slide where the wheel just never stops. And it really is a perpetual flow of people coming into our business through referrals, through introductions. And so that's the methodology behind it.
Amazing.
There's a lot of nuance to it. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in it, but that's the essence. And if someone just thinks in terms of connection, being referable, leverage, being appropriately proactive, connection, getting introduced, or engagement, leverage, connection, you'll do quite well.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for sharing the whole framework. And I think it's amazing that you implemented this. And yeah, I mean, you and I know it's simple, but I think to your point, I think the most important thing is finding the people who share similar values, right? Because I've come across a lot of people who have a transactional mindset, which is it's okay, but I think we want to be intentional about who we're actually bringing in the room or on conversations. But if we have a similar mindset of the co-creation collaboration, then it's really about having those introductions, like you said, the brainstorming, like look at them as like a peer. How can we do this together? Do you know anyone? I love how you talked about the nuances of that. And that's very important because at the end of the day, if you look at it from a place of sometimes, people use coach client words and it looks like a little bit of a hierarchical thing. But we look at it from a place of collaboration, it's very different. And then, showing your value and being memorable, it just comes naturally. And it's like two people working on it together, like that collaboration. It could look at anything. And I wanted to ask you that one question. because I've been kind of having this business model that I'm implementing it here. And everyone's been talking about like cross promotion, podcast swaps, or joint ventures. Is that something that you also implement as part of this strategy, or you prefer that that's a different approach?
No, I think that's a piece of the puzzle. In fact, I have quite a few relationships with people you would think are competitors, and in a way, they are competitors.
Yeah,
Some are doing similar enough work, and even if they're not doing the same work, we're competing for the dollars that a prospect may have to invest in the work we do. But some of my best business has come through collaborating with people like that. Now, how do we make that work? Well, first of all, you've got to be referable, right? These people have to understand your value. You can't just say, hey, I do this, refer me, introduce me, let's collaborate, right? So it takes some work to do that. And then you want to talk about what those introductions look like, and you want to talk about how you're going to handle it. And is there going to be compensation involved? In some cases, there is, sometimes there isn't. Does compensation weaken the referral? Not necessarily. If you are getting compensated and you're recommending, I think it's good to be transparent
yeah,
about it. But again, you need to believe it. So here's the challenge I've had around this. I'll give you two. Number one, I get a lot of LinkedIn messaging is it's the new cold calling.
yeah, yeah,
I connect with people on LinkedIn, and I'm afraid the next thing is going to be a sales pitch.
exactly.
And so, but and I don't connect with everybody, but I connect a lot. Anyway, so it's people use the word partner. Let's get on the phone. Let's talk about partnering, partnership, partnered.
Yeah,
And I don't even know who they are,
yeah,
right? And so my first question is, when you say the word partnership, what do you mean by that?
exactly.
And I think it's I want to say overused word. It's maybe not an overused word, but it's getting close to being overused only because people don't know what it means to be a true
Right.
partnership,
Yeah,
and there are different types of partnerships. All right, so that's one of my things. The other is I am the best at selling my services, and when I sell my products and services, that's the most profitable, and so
mhm,
that's what I'm going to be focused on. Now, so I resist affiliate relationships because I found that all that does is distract me from what I want to sell, which is my own stuff and where I make the most amount of money. Now, I know there's exceptions to that. I know some people probably do quite well with the affiliate relationships, and I've seen people have a business, they could become an affiliate partner with someone else, and they make more money from being the affiliate than their own regular business. Okay, fine, great, more power to you. I just think that for me, I've struggled with that side of things a little bit. So the partnerships that I develop are just purely mutual support relationships where I'll interview them for my podcast. They'll interview me for theirs. We'll do a joint webinar. I've had a few friendly competitors. We've done boot camps together where they've invited their clients. I've invited my client. So it's more like partnering and promoting each other
yeah,
and creating
yeah,
that visibility for each other that you mentioned earlier, rather than a true kind of business share the revenue type of partnership. But that's just my experience. That's just
yeah.
what I've done.
Yeah, amazing. And thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah,
yeah, I think there's different ways of the strategies that I've come
clearly.
across. And I think some affiliates, yeah, it's not my thing. It could work, but I think it works for a lot of people, which is great. And then there's the joint ventures, which I think it's a current exploration that I'm having. I don't know if it's like a successful thing, but a lot of people have been successful. But to your point, I think it's really important to start out with just cross promotion and, building that trust even before we get into that. I was talking to someone yesterday and he was like, there's a collaboration ladder, and it starts out with just, post swaps or podcasts, interview them, get to, feature them and then go into like how can you like do something together, even if it's a webinar, if you have something that's, even though we don't think of it as a competitor, like even though we do similar things, like I've done it with another career coach, even though I was a career coach, but we have different complementary traits, right, at the same time, and strengths. And how can we cross promote and help each other? Like you said, it's a mutual alignment, mutual support. So start out with that, and if it works, go to the next thing. If it doesn't, that's okay. But, start out with really just building that trust. So, thank you for sharing your, your experience. And I think I just wanted to put it out there because this is a very new concept that it seems to be working as part of the referral strategy for
Good.
some people. So I
Yeah,
think
good.
it's more into the B2B space, not many much in the B2C space, but just wanted to kind of like put it out there. Thank you. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
And also just advice for emerging leaders. So, how can leaders create opportunities without constantly feeling like they're selling? So, what would the first thing they could do if someone was listening, like today?
Well, first of all, get over the fact that selling is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Selling's not a bad thing. We're all selling something. It's just what you're making that word mean. Now, we don't want to be aggressive. We don't want to be deceitful. We don't want to manipulate someone to do something that they don't want to do. But if we don't make a sale, we don't have a business. Okay. So, first thing to do is to get over that fear of, the word sales and selling and all that. We're all doing it. Now, the question is how you do it and how you approach it. So it does get back to believing in your value, because if you don't believe in your value, it's pretty darn hard to sell or promote or encourage anyone to do anything. Now, here's a little thing that I've learned for people that are newer in this business. Well, you don't have to be newer. You just have to, if you're reluctant to brag, if you're reluctant to talk about yourself, because you talked a lot about it's about them, it's about the prospect, it's about the client. Well, yeah, to a point, it is also about us. We have to create win-win situations, and at
Exactly.
some point, they want to know who we are, who is this person in front of them, who's trying to help, and and why do they believe in their value? So we can't take ourselves out of the equation. We don't lead with trying to brag. We don't lead with trying to establish our
Exactly.
credibility. We lead with them and understanding their situation. And then there's
Exactly.
a time to bring in talking about ourselves and why we believe we're a good solution for their situation, or why we believe our ideas are worth buying into, if you will. So one thing that I have done myself, and I also teach and consult around, is, and this kind of goes back to that value discussion, is what do your clients say? What do your customers say? And how would they say it? And have conversations, and let some of your clients know, I'm working on how I talk about my value, and how would you describe what makes me different? How would you describe the benefits
Mhm.
of what I do? What's your experience been? And then sometimes you learn ways to talk about your business that you would never think of, first of all. And it's in the language, the real language, not made up language in your head, but it's in the real language of people are telling you. And then you can use that. And one of the best ways to use that, I'll give you a couple examples in a second, but one of the best ways to use that is to say, my clients say, our clients tell us. So we're kind of tooting our own horn a little bit, but we're
Right.
really quoting,
Yeah.
right? We're quoting someone else. So I'll give you a couple examples. For my own business, I was talking to one of my clients years ago, and Michael Schmitz, his name is San Mateo, California. And so I was asking him this question, what makes us a little different? How do you see it's the work I do? He says, oh, that's easy, Bill. I tell people about you all the time. I tell them, I say, Bill Cates makes asking for referrals as natural as breathing.
Hmm.
And they go, wow, that's pretty cool. I never would have thought of that. Right. Can I use that? Can I coach you? He says, yeah, of course. So, now if I put that on my website, or if I put that in promotional, I said, I can make asking for referrals as natural as breathing. That's hype, right?
Right.
That's marketing hype. If I have a picture of Michael Schmitz and I quote him and says, Bill Cates, now it's not hype, it's real. And I'm just quoting someone.
Yeah.
I had a couple of advisors, they were partners in a practice, and I had them do this exercise, and Peter and Daniel, and they went in front of a client and says, how do you view what we do and what makes us, oh, it's easy. I call you guys my dream makers. And they said, what do you mean by that? Well,
Hmm.
not only have you learned about my dreams and goals financially, but you're helping me set aside the money. You're making sure I'm staying disciplined. I'm realizing these dreams because you're helping me keep them alive
Yeah.
and helping me fund them. So I call you the dream makers. And they looked at each other and go, wow, maybe that's it. So now they use that, but they're using it, quoting the client, et cetera. So go to your clients, go to your customers,
Yeah.
go to other people. How are they seeing what you do? And then learn from that and take that in and then use that. And that will bolster your belief and your confidence. And you have to believe this. At the end of the day, if you're working with that person, they're better off working with you. If you believe that,
Yeah.
then go for it and be confident about it. If you don't believe it, then either walk away from the deal because it's not a match,
Right.
and or work on your confidence around the value that you deliver so that you can believe it. At the end of the day, really in the quote unquote sales process, I found it's very powerful that you need to make a recommendation. You can't just say, what do you think? Say, we could go this way, we could go this way. Some clients go this way. What do you think? Well, you can certainly gauge their thinking around that. But at the end of the day, you've got to say, based on everything I've learned about you and your situation, you go, here's what I recommend. And
Mm.
that takes confidence to do that,
Yeah.
right? It
Yeah.
takes a little courage if you're not in the habit of it, and it takes confidence to do that. But that's whenever I do that, I always do better than when I forget it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. So I love how you said all of this. And yeah, literally just ask the people, right? And like you said, just ask them how they feel about you. And a lot of people come to me saying, like, hey, like, this is what I think about this, what you're doing. It's inspiring. So just talk to them. Just do like a market research, understand their language, and
Yes.
go from there. And that makes a huge difference than assuming, because sometimes we assume like this is what they want. We just go all in. And that was a lesson that I learned than just being like, okay, just talk to the people and what they want. And that's a thing that I also, it made a difference for me is I first kind of created the culture, like you said, before I even put a price on it, right? I just talked to them. What do they need? What do they want? What would be like the ideal product or ideal community? And currently, that's what I'm building. And then I put that price in. If it's really that valuable, then they will pay for it, right? And you have to believe in that too, like you said. So I love those first steps, right? It's very important. And I love how you said selling is not a bad thing. And yeah, I mean, obviously, we come from this market of like, you should not sell, and oh my God, and we get all these like spam messages. And it's okay to sell. To your point, it's really how do you approach it, but approach it from a very authentic place first. Set
Right.
the foundation and then ask, like, then be like, this is why I'm the solution. So I love how you said that. Right. So thank you so much for all your wisdom and time today. And
I've
this
been
is,
around a long time. I've seen a lot. I guess I got something to say.
yeah, this is all great. And yeah, what's next for you? Any programs, initiatives? And I know you're writing a new book. So I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. Thank you. And it goes into the heart of what we're talking about. So how to explain this? So it's all about transformations. It's all about creating transformations for our prospects and our clients. When, way back when our economy, we're in, most of the people I guess are listening are in the US. So, but it's really worldwide.
Mhm.
Economies were agrarian. They were based on agriculture, right? And then slowly over time, agricultural methods got more and more and more and more efficient. And then that's when manufacturing started to become where you take these raw goods, you turn them into something. And then we became a manufacturing economy for the longest time. And that became more and more and more efficient. And a lot of that's done somewhere else. And so now we're in a service economy. And most of the businesses in this country are service businesses. And so once you get the experience that what people experience in doing business with you has always been important, but in the service economy, it's even more important, especially if you're in a business that's a bit commoditized, where at least from the outside view looking in, a lot of businesses look the same. It's the experience that people go through. But there is a higher level, there's a further level, and that's the transformation that we create for
Yeah.
people. And so the book I'm writing, the contention is this. The contention is that memorable experiences are great. Memorable experiences will get people talking about us to other people sometimes. Memorable experiences can make us more referable, but meaningful experiences where even the identity of the person that
Right.
we're serving has shifted a little bit. I
Exactly.
used to be worried about this, and now I'm confident about that. When
Right.
that transformation has taken place, that's what create advocates, right? We want to create
Exactly.
advocates for ourselves.
Yeah.
And we don't just want advocates who talk about us and create word of mouth. That's nice. Sometimes that makes a difference. And depending on the business, word of mouth is pretty critical. But for most people listening here to this conversation, word of mouth isn't enough. We
Yeah.
need connections. So creating transformation, creating advocates, and then helping advocates become really good advocates by
Yeah.
making connections. So that's what the book's going to be about. It's going to focus about 60%, 70% on the transformations that we create and how we do that and what I mean by that. And then how we start to leverage that, right? How do we start to create the advocates from that? And some of what you heard me talk about is already part of that. And then, so that's where I pull in some of my other stuff back into the book around transformation. So that's what I'm into right now. I'm loving it. I'm learning a lot. I'm interviewing 100 people on what that means to them
Yeah.
and getting examples of how they create transformation in their clients' lives. So the book will be very, very meaty in that sense. It won't be just philosophy and concept. It'll
Yeah.
be, here's what it actually looks like. Here's how it plays out in a
Amazing.
business.
Amazing. First of all, congrats. And I can
Thank
relate
you.
to everything you're saying because that's what, my philosophy is identity shifts, right?
Yep.
And I'm currently going through them. A lot of my clients are going through them. And it starts from that transformative experience.
That's
And
right.
that's exactly how right now I have about 4 founding stewards as part of my collective. And they're Atmos advocates, and it really started from the identity shift and really believing in myself and that transform experience I had, and now I'm sharing it to the world. And there's so many advocates that are coming in, and how that you leverage that for sustainable growth, right? So very similar thing that you're writing, so I'm glad that you're sharing that. And
Thank you.
like to your point, that meaningful experience, right? I think referrals is the first step, but really creating that back to the culture piece, right? Culture, meaningful experiences, that true connection. Because in the world of automation and AI that I keep seeing everywhere I go, this is missing, right? So kudos to you. I would love to read your book, and
Thank you.
I
We'll
think it'd
keep you
be.
in the loop for sure.
Yes, amazing. So thank you so much for sharing all of this, and would love to go into the fun rapid fire round just to have a little bit of fun.
I'm nervous. I don't know what the questions are going to be.
Yes, it's really simple, but you got this. You're already doing great. So, okay. So, favorite city that you've visited?
Oh, my favorite city. Gosh, I got so many cities that I really enjoy. I loved Sydney, Australia. I have to say
Oh, nice.
that stacks up there. Montreal in Canada is just a beautiful
Hmm.
city in the summer, and Vancouver. Those are two of my favorite cities, and our neighbors up north. I live in Washington D.C. and there's a little controversy around D.C. these days, but I love the city. It's a great city. It's a very international city, and I
Yeah.
like that. So I don't know. That's a couple of things that come to mind.
First of all, I live in DC too, so I didn't know
Yep.
that. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
and yeah, it's a controversy. It's nice here. Like my whole life, I've been raised here, so it's
Mm-hmm.
nice. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm moving out of here soon, hopefully. But yeah, I haven't been to Montreal nor Sydney, Australia. That's on my bucket list. So I know it's beautiful, so I'd love to go. But love how you share that, and I'm amazing. So okay, next. If you weren't teaching like, business coaching referrals, what career might you have pursued?
Oh gosh. Well, I mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation that I was a drummer in a rock and roll
Oh
band,
yeah.
and what happened? I was doing fairly well, but I did a bit of a talent assessment, and I realized, if I stay on this path, I won't get to the level that I really would like to be. I'll be playing Holiday Inns the rest of my life was the joke. But gosh, if I could wave a magic wand, I'd be playing my drums. I'd be playing in front of a lot of people. I'd be just having a blast, entertaining through that. It didn't happen, won't happen. But that's what comes to mind a little bit. And the one, I'm not sure I want to call it a regret of my business, but the one thing I often think about is that I travel a lot and have traveled a lot, around the world. It's been wonderful in a lot of cases. But there's a part of me wishes I had developed a more local business, so I could have been involved in the community and sponsored the little league teams and just done all that locally. And I would have enjoyed that. I would have enjoyed being a business person within a local community. So had I do it over again, I don't know if I'd done anything different, but that hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah. I love the answers, and yeah, the drummer thing and all of that. Like I would love to see that side, that'd be amazing. So kudos, very amazing. And number one other question. So one thing people would be surprised to learn about you, like other than the whole like drummer, but what is something else that people would be surprised to learn about
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't know that I'm a bit of an adventurer. I've done some pretty cool adventures over the years. I've trekked to Everest Base Camp. I've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, 19,300 feet. I camped in the Arctic Circle. I've cycled through the countryside of Vietnam. I've done a lot of kind of adventures. I would like to keep doing more, but most of my friends are like, they don't want to do that anymore. They just want to stay in cushy hotels, and nothing wrong with cushy hotels. I like those too, but I like the adventure. So toying with the idea of climbing Mount Kilimanjaro again at age 75, I don't know, but here's what happened. So my wife and I used to cycle a lot, and she had an accident. And so she kind of was afraid to get back on the bike for a few years. Totally understandable. But then she finally did. And after one or two rides with her son, she decides we're going to ride a 100-mile bike ride. So I'm in training, so to speak, for 100 miles in one day. It's called the Seagull Century. It's in Salisbury, Maryland, not too far from where you and I live. And so that's my next adventure, riding 100 miles in one day.
Wow, that's so amazing and so inspiring to hear that you climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and everything. Like, I need to learn from you to be more adventurous. Like,
I lived on a houseboat in Kashmir, India. I've been to Kashmir. It's like,
Wow.
you can't get in there anymore right now.
Yeah.
But back then,
Amazing. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I love this conversation. Lots of wisdom and insight. So thank you so much for joining us today, Bill. And this conversation was such a powerful reminder that growth isn't always about doing more marketing in the traditional sense, but it's not about posting content, all of that. It's really about becoming so clear, relevant, and valuable that opportunities naturally find their way to you, right? So magnetizing it and with ease. So I loved your perspective on trust, reputation, and the idea that authentic positioning creates long-term business momentum and sustainable growth in the long term. So it's really important to have your foundation set in place. In a world where everyone's competing for attention, your work reminds us that relevance and relationships always win. I know that's very true. So, for everyone listening, if this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to connect with Bill, explore his books, and learn more about his work around referrals, radical relevance, and relationship driven growth. And also excited to announce about Sovereign Rise because we have very similar conversations around it's really built on this business model of, really a curated global leadership ecosystem who want to grow their visibility through authentic connections and impact in a more aligned, sustainable way. So we're bringing together exceptional people from around the world to co-create opportunities, share thought leadership, collaborate on ventures, support book launches, all of that, right? So it's really about community than competition. So there's no competition, hustle, grind, or anything like that. It's officially launched. And to also talk about, I did mention that we have 4 lovely founding stewards who are also advocates already. And we're seeing incredible momentum through referrals, as always, right? So all of this we're talking about is really working and is successful. So if you're interested in joining as a founding member, speaker, strategic partner, or just a collaborator, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. And until next time, remember that your greatest impact doesn't come from being the loudest voice in the room. It comes from becoming so aligned within yourself, right? Knowing your true value and being relevant and authentic that the right people see your value and can't help but remember and recommend and trust you. All right. So thanks for listening. And thank you, Bill, again for joining us for a wonderful conversation. And we'll see you in the next episode.